Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have a set of horrifying encounters to share with you all. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As you all know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the membership to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, channel membership are in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into today's upload, shall we? Today's first encounter. This happened in rural Minnesota, June 2009, and I was pretty young at the time. My dad and I were riding our horses down a trail behind his house, heading to the gate that separated his land from the state forest. As we neared the gate, the horses' heads lifted and their ears perked with alarm. We followed their line of sight, noticing animal movement around a clump of trees. It appeared to be a dog or a coyote sniffing around, so my dad pointed it out. "Hey, Queen Brave, look at that coyote." We didn't think much of it. Well, coyotes are a neat sight. It's not really anything special for the area. And it's pretty standard behavior for coyotes to be fearful of humans, so we expected it to be on its merry way. Wildlife forgotten, my dad dismounted his horse and moved toward the gate to unlatch it, so we could continue our ride. But as he was doing so, the animal headed in our direction, until it was only a few feet away from behind the fence. It stopped, and we were stunned not only by its audacity, but by the size of it. It was absolutely huge and definitely not a coyote. But a unique attribute was the purple collar it sported. Still, we didn't see it as anything more than a weird occurrence and wrote it off as someone's large and friendly wolfish husky that had gotten loose, and my dad got back on the horse so we could go. Once my dad was off the ground again, this thing started to move, and God, was it intelligent. It easily glided under the fence and went straight for me, smaller person on a smaller horse. But its eyes were on my dad, obviously trying to calculate what he was going to do. It circled my horse and began attempting to separate her from the other one, which was when we both realized something was wrong with the situation. It did not look crazy. There was no foaming at the mouth or unnatural movements. That's what was unnerving. The wolf was collected and precise with everything it did. My dad, being excellent in high-pressure situations, calmly dismounted once more and looked at this creature square in its eyes and yelled, "Go! Get away from us!" He menacingly lunged at the creature. I can assure you his voice is more than intimidating, especially when it's raised, yet the wolf didn't flinch. Next, he instructed me to steer my horse, being the more aggressive equine of the two, so the wolf was between her rear end and the fence post. I do as asked, and his plan works, almost. She kicked the wolf hard, as we could hear its skull collide with her hoof and the fence post. This did not faze it, and it got back up without any visible signs of pain or injury. At this point, my dad explained that we are going to turn around and try to get to the barn, figuring it wouldn't follow us to the front yard. We began walking back, him leading the horses and me riding mine. But the wolf's interest was trained on me, and it didn't give up on circling my horse. About halfway to the barn, my dad saw the wolf wasn't going to flee and called 911 to get help. The emergency responder was very dismissive, and my dad was fighting with her to send officers. The wolf picked up on his distraction and took this opportunity to attack the horse, snapping at her legs. I panicked, screeching to my dad that she was being attacked, and he requested help for one last time before telling the responder that he had to go. He reached the front yard, but progress was slow going because my dad had to watch the wolf, the horse, and myself. Meanwhile, it remained solely intrigued in me and kept circling. Unfortunately, the plan to use the barn fell through after remembering we closed the garage-like door, and the only way to open it was manually from inside of the barn. Not wanting to leave us alone with this creature, my dad rerouted us to the dog kennel, which was surrounded by a decently sized fence. The wolf did not follow me or the horses, and my dad closed us in while he went to the house to retrieve his rifle. The creature nosed around the yard casually until my dad returned after seeing his gun. The wolf ran. My dad fired but didn't manage to hit it despite being an excellent shot. Immediately, he tried to find paw prints to determine where the wolf had disappeared to, but did not find anything. And this is when 2 police officers showed up. The officers looked downright terrified once informed of what was going on, and my dad expressed interest in looking for the wolf, to which they hesitantly agreed. He searched the property for more than an hour but didn't find anything, and they left. My dad and I got the horses calmed and examined them for injuries. Mine had deep gashes on the back of her foreleg. The next day, I was walking on the same trail with my dad, who was carrying his rifle. We peered into one of the horse pastures, and there it was again. Staring back, blankly and unmoving, didn't seem afraid in the least, and did nothing but keep its eyes on us. I was young, stupid, and scared, so I shouted, "There it is," or something similar, which spooked it. After the events of the previous day, we were both surprised. I managed to frighten it enough to take off. But perhaps it was actually afraid of the rifle. This is the only other time we had seen it. Finally, my dad asked around his community to see if anyone had a pet that matched the description, checking bulletin boards, assuming that somebody would be searching for it, considering the collar, with no luck. The horse was treated, no infection or rabies, which we found quite shocking since we figured the wolf had to have been sick to go after us. Despite the inconsistencies, my dad and I decided to settle on the wolf being extremely hungry, though it was not thin or just plain crazy, even though it didn't look or act the part. Needless to say, subsequent trail rides were always accompanied by my dad's pistol. Now, if anyone's wondering, yes, the emergency responder did get into trouble over their conduct. It took forever to send somebody because my dad sounded too calm on the phone, and they needed officers present for the festival in the town at the time. My dad had a chat with the police chief, leading to the call being reviewed. Turns out, the creature could be heard attacking my horse in the background. Today's second encounter. Back in July of 2004, near Gallup, New Mexico, I had my first and only encounter with the paranormal. Before this, I used to say, "I'll believe it when I see it." Well, I'm a believer now. What I saw was neither full human nor full animal. I was moving and had just completed the cleaning and was with my 10-year-old son. We had called it a night and we were headed to the new place. As we walked out the front door, I saw a figure move behind my neighbor's car to a nearby tree that stood between our apartments. It did not have glowing red eyes, snarling teeth, or smell rotten. It did move quickly, but not quick enough to avoid the light from the nearby light post and the porch lights. It didn't look to me or come towards me. It moved as if it was trying to be avoided. I was about 15 feet from it, but I did not look back to fully inspect it. What I saw was a wolf-like animal with sort of a resemblance to the Beauty and the Beast, not cartoonish at all. It had brown fur that completely covered it. It was not a pelt. It was a very large wolf. It didn't have any human traits except for it walked on two legs. It cowered behind the trees as we got into the vehicle. When we got in, I asked my son, "Did you see that?" Thankfully, he had not. Today's third encounter. All of these occurrences happened near the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. I grew up on a farm surrounded by woods. My first encounter I had with something unsettling happened during a sleepover I had with two of my friends. After a riveting day of running through the woods and having fun, we settled down for bed. It was a full moon. The light pierced through the blinds I had in my room. My two friends, let's call them A and A, were sleeping on the bottom bunk, while I slept on the top. They had fallen asleep, but I seemed not to be able to zonk off, so I decided to peek through the blinds. The full moon stared at me. I looked away just for a second, but when I looked back, there was a creature. The head was shaped similar to that of a horse, with glowing red eyes and shaggy, thick, dark brown fur. The window is about 6 feet off of the ground. The bunk bed is also about 6 feet, so this creature must have been 9 feet. I don't know what it was, but it certainly scared me, and badly. My second experience, I was with my two best friends, C and K. We were having a sleepover together outside in a tent. In our tent, we had one light, a small battery-operated lantern. It was dark and quiet outside when all of a sudden something was hurled at our tent. My friend C felt that we were in danger, but did not know from what. And we had no way of defending ourselves, so we decided to attempt to grab something that could be used in our defense from the car near the tent. C decided to be the one to go and grab something. As she went toward the car, she screamed. She immediately sprinted back with fear in her eyes. We asked what happened, and she told us about a large figure with glowing red eyes resembling a wolf. We ended up leaving the tent for good later on that evening. My last experience as an avid trail runner, I'm used to the woods in which I run in. I tend to run near dusk as the sun is setting, but refuse to run when it's dark outside. I feel at home in this forest. I've never feared it, not until now. I began to feel like I was being watched. As I was running, yes, I know the forest is always watching with all of its animals, but this feeling was different. It was more of a fear-inducing feeling. Then, about 4 days after this began, I saw these glowing orbs, only a couple, but they led deeper and deeper into the woods. All of this leads towards the place my father and I found when I was young, where a deer's ribcage was stuck in a hollow of a tree, almost like it had been put there purposely. There is also a big mound of rocks near it. Those rocks were not just randomly placed. They formed a large rectangular-like shape, similar to a grave. I haven't seen the orb since, but it was unsettling. By far the most unsettling thing that has happened would be the amount of times I felt like something was following me or chasing me through the woods. I've even had the gut feeling something was trying to lure me deeper into the woods. Whenever I feel that something is off and there is a malicious intent, I turn around and go back. The feeling of dread has only gotten stronger. Today's fourth experience comes to us from Pennsylvania. I've had weird experiences with the supernatural all my life. When I was a kid, I was afraid of the outside. I was fine during the day, but screw the night and the woods. You see, the woods near my house are known for supernatural stuff and bad stuff in general. Either way, one night when I was lying in my bed looking out my window, I thought I saw a wolf gunning for the woods across the clearing. What scared me was when it got within 30 feet of the tree line and stood up on two legs and calmly walked into the trees. I haven't seen it since, but I always get feelings of being watched when I'm near those woods, and I always hear weird stuff. During the day, I hear my name getting yelled in my dad's voice from the woods, or at night, when I'm letting my dog out, I'll hear twigs snapping just beyond the darkness, and my dog will flip out. Today's fifth encounter. This experience takes place in an unknown place called Lake Anawanda, next to Lake Tenaha. These lakes are in upstate New York in the Catskill Mountains. Anyway, me and my cousins like to take walks around the lake. We're walking like usual when we notice something unusual. There was something in the middle of the road about 10 yards away. We took one step forward to see that it looked like a coyote. Though it looked like a coyote, it was far too big to be one. This thing was huge. It had red eyes, and they were very unsettling. It stared us down as we stood there in shock. This went on for about a minute before it pranced off into the woods. My cousins and I proceeded to sprint in the opposite direction towards home. Today's sixth encounter. First, I'd like to start off that I am definitely not a very good writer, but I need to get this stuff off of my chest. I grew up on the border of New York and Vermont, so my front yard was in New York and the back was in Vermont. This was 23 years ago. The road we lived on was a very long road, only 3 houses on that 2-mile stretch. My parents, my grandparents, and an old couple that lived at the very end of this road. The road's name was Golf Course Road. We're surrounded by forest. I always used to play in the woods. When my cousins would spend the weekends, we would go all out, making forts and kid stuff like that. So all over the place, there would be little camps that we would make. Behind my grandparents' house used to be a tree farm from way back in the day. If anyone has ever been to a tree farm, it's kind of creepy because they're all in a row. So this tree farm area ends where the forest begins. Oh yeah, all of the trees are pine trees and somewhere very big. Now, where the forest and the tree farm meet was a cool place because the forest was so dense. We could never really get through it or see through it. Well, we had built a little camp in the very back. Now, one day during the week, I remember I left some of my favorite trucks at this camp, so I decided to go and get them. I make my long walk back. I get about 20 yards when I see the thick brush from the forest start to rustle. Not like a little, but very violently. Before I say anything else, I want to say that my cousins would be dropped off at my grandparents' house, and I would have no idea until I saw them. One of my cousins is David, and he was a jerk, always trying to scare me. Okay, so I think David is trying to scare me, so I yell out, "David, stop it." Now I can hear heavy breathing and the branches breaking. Again, I yell, "David, stop, I'm getting scared." Something starts growling. Not like a bear or a dog, but almost robotic. I was young when this happened, but I remember the next part made me crap my pants. Something said, "Stop, David," in a really shaky, robotic voice. Just then I saw it walk out of the trees. Long, lanky limbs, no fur. Its face was dog-like and very long. I ran, crappy pants and all. I ran the fastest I had ever run. When I got out in the open, I saw my gram and grandfather were home, bringing groceries in. I run up their porch, into the house, crying like crazy. The next hour or so is kind of hazy to me. I remember them asking what happened, and I kept saying David scared me. Well, my gram calls my uncle and tells her something's in the woods that scared me, and she wants him to check it out, thinking maybe it was a mountain lion or something. Okay, this is what makes this all the worse. My uncle comes back. 2 small female deer were ripped apart out in the forest behind the pine tree farm. After that, we moved to Tennessee, and I never played in the woods again. Today's 7th encounter. I was a freshman in high school at the time. We lived in the woods in Williamstown, New Jersey. Here we have things like the Jersey Devil and the Blue Hole. Most importantly, it's well known Williamstown, New Jersey was inhabited by the Lenni Lenape tribe, Native Americans, from whom the town derived its original name, Squancum. The name Lepet, for place where the evil spirits dwell, was changed to Williamstown when the town's first post office was established. Yeah, I did pull that from Google, but it's 100% true. Look it up for yourself. More specifically, the lakes is where my experience took place. We lived on the last lake on the outskirts of town. It wasn't probably until 10 years ago these roads were all dirt paths. So my father had just built this new addition onto our home. It faced the back of our house towards the deep woods. My driveway being the front, but a good distance really in the woods. Great place for a murder scene. It was all glass windows, which terrifying for obvious reasons. This addition was to be the new living room, an extension to our dining room. It was designed in a way while inside you couldn't see outside or towards the dining room or the rest of the house, unless you got up and looked. The only light source being a chandelier from the dining room, which was stuck on haunted house mode for no apparent reason. Oh, and the horrible dining room table with that disturbing cloth for something to hide under, but there was the light from the television in the living room if you chose to use it. I suppose to make it feel more cozy, snug with furniture. I did digress. All of this will make sense as to paint a picture for you of what was to follow. So I remember my father would work very late on occasion. He closed a retail store enough towns over where it would be sometimes 11 p.m. before he came home and we ate dinner. Not complaining, just our thing. I'd spend my time in this living room watching television until he'd come home. This particular instant, it must have been around 6 p.m.-ish when the dark started to creep in. For the purpose of my experience, let's say my name's Jake. I'm sitting there watching the Food Network. Then it hits you like a ton of bricks. I say to myself, Jake, whatever you do, just don't look to your right no matter what you do. Something is there that's not supposed to be there. In fact, don't move a muscle from this couch because you simply are not equipped for whatever otherworldly entity has the ability to make your dining room feel like a black hole where reality just doesn't exist. The strange quiet, the chill, I can't explain it. You know the feeling all too well, so let's dive right into it. So amid being frozen to my chair watching television, a few hours had passed by of me crying on the inside, not really watching TV. When call it puberty, because I'd know better at this current age, something made me sneak a peek. Now, I'm not trying to be dramatic, but they say eyes are the windows to your soul. I believe you'd die of a heart attack had you looked onward any longer than I did. All jokes aside, what I saw were two of the largest yellowish-green eyeballs looking directly at me in what I'd imagine to be an evil grin, or maybe none at all. It could have wiggled its tongue. You overlook that every time. It's something you'll never forget, almost like the Cheshire Cat. I'd say its eyes were just shy of the size of grapefruits, but that would just be too big. These were just two of the biggest eyeballs you'd wish you'd never see. Unmistakable by any non-fictional living thing in this world has to offer. If it were fiction, I'd say Smeagol. But these eyes were not desperate. They were burning through me. From another dimension, I'd compare it to what I'd imagine opening Pandora's box must have felt like, or seeing a new color, not on the spectrum, just not for human consumption. I imagined this thing wanted to pretend to be our cat. It was not our cat. It was not a cat. It was highly disturbing, mimicking a cry. I spent the rest of those 2 hours waiting for my dad to come home like it never happened. I believe the fear was so pure one can only make comical comparisons to accurately describe what took place. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I don't know its purpose, but judging how that night ended, I believe that in the fear, those eyes that saw around the corners seemingly knew what state it put me in and loved it, intended on it, possibly worse, and was drinking from me. Literally from that moment, I said, "Jake, don't look to your right," until my father came home. I told my dad what happened. He laughed, took me out to the local diner, came back. The chandelier was smashed into a million pieces, hand on the Bible. We talk about this often. Cats' blank stares scare me to this date. Today's final encounter. I just discovered what a skinwalker was, and I have two experiences to share. They both came to me from my mom and my grandfather. They both lived in a small Native American village. The first is from my grandfather when he was young. He and his friend went to buy some bread to eat with coffee. When they were coming back home, it was around 11 p.m. They had lived in an old-fashioned village. They didn't have streetlights, so they had to bring their own light. As they walked, a black cat followed them. At first, they ignored it. Later on, they noticed it was following them quickly. My grandfather, thinking it was an omen, he said out loud, "Leave," which it did not do until he spit on it. And then that's both when he and his friend freaked out. The cat was no longer there. Instead, an old man in the blink of an eye appeared. They could not see his face as he was looking down, and it was dark. They both ran away from him. Later on, some villagers asked him if they had crossed the bridge from the village, which they did. They found out the bridge is mostly done using black magic/witchcraft. Mom told me her experience, which happened to her when she was around 15 or 16. She said she'd go to sleep before 10, but at night she couldn't sleep, like she felt like she was being watched. She said it was her first time feeling being watched in her own room. She heard an owl hooting outside. She thought maybe it was because of that she couldn't fall asleep, and she tried to ignore it. Later on, she heard her mom say, "Can you come and help me outside with the wood?" My mom was confused and shocked because her mom is usually asleep around this time. And why would she say that when her mom knows she was in bed? As my mom got near the door to leave, her mom came from behind her and asked where she was going around this time in an angry voice. My mom explained what had happened to her, and her mom was in shock because she had heard stories of skinwalkers, so she prayed that entire night. Now, I'm not sure if this counts as a skinwalker experience, but my grandmother told me when she recently got married, she had a frightening experience that still haunts her. Since her and my grandfather lived in a small village, the news easily got around. She owned a farm. She leave her door open because the neighbors lived far away, and she used to work outside a lot with the animals, and people rarely visited without saying first. But a few days after she had gotten married, she went inside the house, and in the living room was a black dog staring at her picture frame of the recent marriage. She got really scared because this dog was huge, and obviously it could be violent. She quickly ran out and grabbed a shovel and went back in. She screamed at the dog, and it ignored her, staring at the picture. She screamed again, and that's when the dog looked at her and quickly ran out of the house. She said the dog was huge, and it was the biggest dog she has ever seen in her life. All right, everyone, what a set of just absolute horrifying encounters. stepping toe-to-toe, eye-to-eye with one of these creatures. No thank you. Guys, thank you for supporting the channel. Your support is truly appreciated. It's also what makes this channel continue to grow and go, and what makes it so special. You all in the comment section, the community you guys have created, the kindness and respect that you guys have for each other is truly, truly amazing. It is unheard of in the cryptid community as a whole, but somehow it's done here. Awesome. Thank you guys. It's nothing I did. It's all you. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real and they are dangerous. Share a little bit of information with those you love and care about. That same info we share with each other here on a daily basis. That information may save someone you love and care about's life someday. God bless you all.